So at this time we're going to go ahead and talk about the cocoa industry and some of the type of abuses that's happening within the cocoa industry. Unfortunately, at this time it is known that there are child slaves within the cocoa plantations cultivating the cocoa beans. So let's talk a little bit about what cocoa is. We know that these are beans that are coming from the Theobroma tree. And basically within the cocoa bean itself there are seeds, and these seeds are used to make such products as chocolate, cocoa butter, and cocoa powder, which obviously we know is used for making hot chocolate. But right now one of the main places that we focus on and that other anti-trafficking organizations focus on is the Ivory Coast, which is located in Africa. About 40% of the cocoa worldwide comes from the Ivory Coast. So they are definitely producing most of the cocoa that is used throughout the entire world. So let's talk a little bit about how much we consume. How much does the U.S. actually consume in cocoa? We know that every single year 21 pounds of chocolate are consumed by every single person in the U.S. every single year. Over 400 companies manufacture more than 90% of the chocolate and confectionery products that are consumed within the United States. The United States manufactures over 7 billion pounds of chocolate and candy every single year. And the United States' leading source of cocoa beans is from the Ivory Coast. As I mentioned, 40% of the cocoa comes from this particular country within within African countries. In 2006, the global sales of chocolate confections were $75 billion, of which the U.S. was responsible for $16 billion in sales. So as of 2006, the United States was basically paying $16 billion for chocolate and other things that used cocoa. So when we talk about child labor, what exactly does that mean? We know that child labor is defined as full-time employment of children under minimum legal age. This is work that deprives children of their childhood, their potential, and their dignity. This is also very harmful to their physical and mental development. Child labor refers to work that is mentally, physically, socially, and morally dangerous to children. And one of the things that people may not understand is when cultivating cocoa beans, a lot of these kids are working in the sun with no breaks, with no clean water. They're having to carry around machetes, and they're having to touch pesticides that will definitely affect them as they continue to grow into adults. A lot of child labor also interferes with their schooling, which is very important to note. As we all know, back in 1948, there was the Declaration of Human Rights that was signed and ratified by the United Nations, and one of the main rights that every single person in the world has is the right to education. So we definitely know that within child labor, this is one human right that is definitely violated. One of the things that the International Labor Organization did was put together a convention that really talks about, child labor and what hazardous work is defined. As you'll see in the PowerPoint, I've definitely added what many of these conventions have or state and what the International Labor Organization recommends. So as far as hazardous work, we know this is work which by its nature or circumstances in which it is carried out is likely to harm the health, safety, or morals of the child. Work that exposes children to physical, psychological, or sexual abuse. And unfortunately, many of us believe that the only victims of trafficking that are victims of sexual abuse are sex trafficking victims, and unfortunately that is incorrect. We do see many victims of labor trafficking or child labor who are also sexually violated. Some of the other things is work that with dangerous machinery, equipment, or tools, or which involves the manual handling or transport of heavy loads. As I mentioned before, these are children as young as 9 and 10 years old that are heaving loads that are way too much for any child to have to work with. And of course, work that is unhealthy, or work in an unhealthy environment, which may, for example, expose children to hazardous substances, agents, or processes, or to temperatures, noise level, or vibrations damaging to their health. So the main gist of child labor is, again, the fact that this is damaging to their psychological well-being, to their growth, and there's so many different violations that take place. Many of these children are sexually abused, and many of them are physically abused as well. Child labor involves at least one of the following characteristics. We know that it violates the nation's minimum age laws, it threatens children's physical, mental, or emotional well-being, involves intolerable abuse such as child slavery, child trafficking, debt bondage, forced labor, or other illicit activities. We know that it prevents children from going to school, which again is a huge violation of human rights. And this tends to use children to undermine labor standards. Of course, this all goes back to corporate greed and trying to make more of a profit. So some of the statistics that we have on child labor, right now it is estimated that 250 million children are child laborers, 126 million are engaged in hazardous work, 73 million working children are less than 10 years old. So for anyone who is a parent or a grandparent, just imagine anyone in your family that is under the age of 12 working in these type of jobs. 8.4 million children are trapped in slavery, trafficking, debt bondage, prostitution, pornography, or other illicit activities. And 60% of child labor takes place in the agricultural industry. So unfortunately, no matter what type of agriculture we're talking about, we know that there is child labor. But again, we are focusing on the cocoa industry. So as of right now, the U.S. Department of State estimates that there are more than 100,000 children in the Ivory Coast, and what they're saying is that this is probably some of the worst forms of child labor, and that some 10,000 are victims of human trafficking or enslavement. Child workers labor for long, punishing hours, they use dangerous tools, and face frequent exposure to dangerous pesticides. And again, I know that doesn't sound horrifying, but when you see some of the effects that the pesticide has on these children, it truly is heinous. And again, many of these children suffer frequent beatings and other cruel treatment. So some of the things that have taken place in order to attempt to stop child labor within the cocoa fields. Back in 2001, the International Labor Organization met with 8 different companies such as Hershey, Nestle, Cargill, and they came up with the Harkin-Engel Protocol of 2001. This is a commitment by the industry groups World Cocoa Foundation and Chocolate Manufacturers Association. This is also known as the Chocolate Council, the National Confectioners Association. But basically, by signing the Harkin-Engel Protocol, many of these companies agreed to develop and implement voluntary standards to certified cocoa produced without the worst forms of child labor. So again, one of the things that if you actually look at the protocol itself, it specifically states that they would not deal with any plantations or any companies that had child labor. Unfortunately, 10 years later, if you visit to any of the cocoa plantations that work with these 8 companies, you will find child labor. So unfortunately, this protocol really did not accomplish anything. So why is there child labor in the cocoa industry? Well, low cocoa prices. This is, again, the whole issue is a lot of these people are trying to make larger profits, and knowing that they have to pay an adult, they know that they can't get away with not paying anything or paying very little. So it's a lot cheaper to employ a child than it is an adult. And one of the biggest things is the lower labor costs drive farmers to employ children as a means to survive. So unfortunately, some of the adult plantation owners do not get a lot of support, and the only way they'll be able to sustain a living is, again, by employing children. So what can we as consumers do to try and prevent child labor from taking place? one of the things that we first need to realize is if we weren't the ones purchasing the 21 pounds of chocolate per year, if we would stop paying for a lot of this chocolate that is tainted with child labor, such as Hershey's and Nestle and Cargill, this problem wouldn't be happening. We would not have child labor. So one of the biggest problems is that every single one of us, are part of the demand. So one of the things that we can do is start purchasing fair trade chocolate. And basically fair trade is an organized social movement and market-based approach that aims to help producers in developing countries make better trading conditions and promote substantiality. This movement advocates the payment of a higher price to producers as well as higher social and environmental standards. So by purchasing fair trade chocolate, you're ensuring that the chocolate you're eating did not have any child labor in the cultivating of the cocoa, and what you're doing is actually helping those people that are doing things the right way, that they're not cutting the corners. You're promoting and assisting in continuing their work efforts. So one of the biggest things that you can do to try and stop child labor within the cocoa field is to buy fair trade chocolate. Within fair trade, not only do they have chocolate, but they have certain things such as coffee, cocoa, sugar, tea, bananas, honey, cotton, wine, flowers, gold. We're starting to see clothing. So it's very important that us as modern day abolitionists can help promote fair trade in any way possible. So again, one of the things that we definitely promote here at the Florida Coalition Against Human Trafficking is to buy fair trade chocolate. By doing so, you're ensuring that the cocoa beans used in making your chocolate are slave-free. So where can you purchase fair trade chocolate? I can tell you here in Florida, I have found fair trade chocolate in Publix, Walmart, Whole Foods, Target, and also if you go into a lot of the organic stores, you will see that they do offer fair trade chocolate. If for some reason you can't find any fair trade chocolate in your local grocery stores, you're more than welcome to visit fairtradeusa.org, and one of the things that they'll do is they'll point you in the right direction and let you know what companies offer fair trade and where they sell their products or what state they sell their products. So definitely Fair Trade USA is a great place to start looking into the various places that carry fair trade products. So if you have any additional questions on the issue of what's happening within the cocoa industry, please feel free to contact the Florida Coalition Against Human Trafficking. This is something that we are definitely very passionate about, and we're trying to educate as many people as possible because, again, what people need to realize is that every single one of us, unfortunately, are part of the demand for cheap labor. And by becoming educated and educating others in what's happening and what we as consumers can do to help prevent labor trafficking, we really will start making a dent in the fight against human trafficking. So please feel free to contact the Florida Coalition Against Human Trafficking at fcatoffice@gmail.com. So thank you.